Work.
All right. So I want to hop back in here really quickly. I know, Dr. Sanders, you were itching to say something when we were talking about defining the work and not focusing on the language, which is something that you were speaking to now. So I want to make sure that I hear what you had to say in that space. And then I also had a question. You kind of defined it, but I still have a burning question. So go ahead, Dr. Sanders.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. I think it is always short-sighted of us if we don't link contemporary happenings to past occurrences, because there's always a connection, a nexus. So when I think about contemporary DEI efforts, I think about how we look at that small core of Black folks who occupy these positions across the country at institutions and in districts and all these different venues across the country, but we claim, preferential treatment. To me, this harkens back to a time when Black folks used to congregate during American slavery,
Hmm.
and we were called rioters when three or more of us got together, right? You
Hmm.
put more Black folks than you're comfortable with in one space together,
And
and then
that's key, which you're comfortable with. But go
what
ahead.
you're comfortable with. And then you start to throw out these excitable terms. And today, and goes back to my contention about weaponizing language, this comes to the point where we start to weaponize affirmative action, critical race theory. I was in a meeting, a board meeting, some time ago, about maybe 4 years ago, and this one parent stood up and lambasted this other teacher for teaching critical race theory. Now, we know we don't even really teach critical race theory, certainly not to elementary school students and middle school students, but that was their contention. They were teaching critical race theory. So then someone had the gall, and I credit them for this, to ask that person, what is critical race theory?
Silence.
Silence. Silence.
Absolutely.
But again, sound bites, weaponizing language, this is what we do. And when we want to lambaste a population, we throw those excitable, manageable, bite-sized terms that are excitable to everyone. And so I come back to critical race theory. I come back to affirmative action and all the similar terms. Equity. When I was back east about a year ago, I was speaking with a district, actually, it was a university chancellor. And that person told me she was not allowed to use the word equity publicly
Mm.
because it's terms like that, right, that have become the death knell of many people who are doing the DEI work. Um, and I'll say one last thing before I yield. So my contention early on that the genesis of the DEI work began with George Floyd, I maintain that. And what I mean by that is it's the societal acceptance of the DEI version that is palatable, that right, that we consume. It's going to Target and seeing a Black girl with her hair fluffed out, right? It's those are real cursory, real almost phatic versions of DEI work, right? But the real work, I agree, it actually goes back even further than we cited. We can go back to the Reconstruction and start citing
Right.
efforts of this type. But I'm
Absolutely.
talking about the conspicuous consumption.
The modern version.
Conspicuously, the modern version. I believe that
Right.
did begin. We can trace it to George Floyd, and I do believe it's linked to capitalist ideals. And so long as you can profit from an ideal, you will exploit it.
Oh, I 100% acknowledge you for that, and I absolutely agree. I think what happened in 2020 was significant and historic. I refer to 2020 as a planetary reset. Never before in the history of the world has so much of humanity been focused on the uplifting and the empowerment of people who have been historically and marginalized and oppressed. Never before has technology been where we could instantaneously, have people connect from all parts of the world at one time, like in a nanosecond.
So
So
I
Is
you're
want
that
to jump
absolutely
in
right.
is
right
that
there because that
altruism? Sorry, Dr. Rice. Go
that's
ahead.
okay. I just want to jump in right there because that I
Yeah.
feel like that's an important part that we have to kind of bring into this conversation. Because one of the things that you said is that during 2020, like there was a convergence of people who were rallying around, and I think there was maybe not universal, but there was large agreement that there were oppressed people, right?
Oh, I'll say universal. I think you can say
Universal,
that. I
okay.
would lean into that. Absolutely.
Who have been historically oppressed. But when you look at the language that the gentleman from Hillsdale used, they're now saying that we were purportedly oppressed. So what happened from 2020 to 2024 that there was agreement that and there was value in DEI work, there was a push to do it, everybody accepted it. We all put our black screens on social media and we're like, yay, let's help the oppressed people. And in 4 short years, we were able to unravel that planetary shift.
So I think it's, oh,
So what happened?
I'm
My
sorry.
question is, what happened? And then more importantly, because I don't want to rest here in the what happened, but I want to talk about the pathway forward. But I do want us to discuss a little bit, like what happened from
So I
then.
think it's perspective. I think there are some folks who are doing this work who are responding. And I think the majority of organizations, both public and private, were reacting. Dr. Sandel said something really important that I think shouldn't be lost in this conversation, which is the impact of commerce and capitalism. And so that drove a lot of people to react. And so when you react, that is transactional. When you respond, that is transformational. So the reacting is, we need chief diversity officers. Oh, we need a policy statement. Oh, we need training. That's reaction. Responding is, let me be thoughtful, let me be methodical. If we are really going through a culture shift, an organizational shift, that requires a lot of foundational work to support the transformation that must occur. And I think what we're seeing in the transactional space, it has a short shelf life, which we've seen in American history. We're like, okay, we're done with that. We want to get back to normal. You see how we approach the pandemic. When can we go back to normal? There is no back to normal. There's the new normal or the new better, right? That one of my colleagues coined that phrase.
But would you believe? But would you be? I want to push back here. Would you believe that the new better is worse? Because the new better, it seems like, or at least the new better they're attempting to create, is a world without any of those resources, without any of those protections, without the inclusion that we once said we all wanted and needed.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be an effective. For example, I'm a history. I know we're all academics, so my focus was European history. We all know about the French Revolution, that unseated the Bourbon dynasty and created the first French Republic. Then you had Napoleon, and Napoleon was unseated, and the Bourbon monarchy was restored. Who is the king of France today? It's a trick question because the monarchy is gone. They tried to bring it back. It was not sustainable because now progress is, like Barack Obama said, it's not always a straight line. Sometimes it's a zigzag, sometimes it's a curve, but history is always moving us forward. Dr. Sandels mentioned Reconstruction and all the amazing things that happened in Reconstruction. And then you had the Grand Bargain and you had the restoration of white rule and all of these things. But that did not stop our efforts as a people, just like it didn't stop efforts of women to gain power, to gain their, rights to vote, and other folks who by government policy were legally disenfranchised. I think it's helpful to say all the words.
Right.
And when you say all the words, it's very, very difficult to argue. Again, mythology lets you just gloss over and use terms. When you're a word nerd and you're really steeped in what actually happened,
right,
and you say all the words, I don't think this effort is going to be successful. And when I say this effort, I mean this effort to eliminate DEI. And I also think we must be vigilant. And I also think that there are lots of things that we do. So I'm really, when we talk about our pathway forward, I'll be prepared to discuss that. But absolutely, Dr. Rice, I think it's important that that I see history moving forward, even if there are some setbacks. I mean, even look at the election and re-election of President Barack Obama. And what did you have in the United States after that? white lash.
Mhm.
You had the election of the most unqualified white man ever, and over the most qualified candidate who ever ran for president, who happened to be a woman. So does that mean, oh my God, it's the end of the republic? No, it just means that we must be vigilant, that democracy is an action word, it's a verb, and we're all required to affirmatively engage and affirmatively do things. Going back to Dr. Black's comment about mediocre, it is an invitation for us to elevate, to find what is our next level of elevation as an individual, as a group, as a society, as a people, as a group of people, and how do we lift up everyone? And you're right, it's not a Black conversation. It's not a gender conversation. The way we define diversity, diversity is the sum total of all humanity. I think when redefining the terms, it's grounding, and it also can be unifying.
Nice. Dr. Black, one of the things that he was saying, and I know that you work in a large university system, right? What does that mean for that system as we, because again, I know there were some big initiatives there. We know that affirmative action has since been dismantled. DEI is under attack. So what does that mean in a higher education space? And what is that? And is it something that we even need?
It depends on the higher education space. So there, we live in the state of California, and, overall, we pride ourselves on being, liberal, if you will. So many of the things that we've had in place were in place before 2020. So
Are they still there? So they're still in place.
They're still, as long as it's not against the written laws that have been proposed and passed and voted on, they're still in place.
But in other
those
places,
things
some of
still
those
happen.
laws have changed.
The law and the state law in California has remained the same.
Right. Okay.
It is the perception of that law that has changed, but the overall law has not been repealed or replaced. So they're still in place. I was actually against making those statements. I remember, 2020 and people calling me on the phone, we got to say something today. And words are powerful, and they need to have meaning. And if you're just saying something because Coca-Cola said something, then maybe you shouldn't say anything.
Reactionary, yeah.
But, I'm one of those people, if you say something, I'm going to make you live up to it. Well, that's what you said. You should have said it then. So we're in that space now where I'm making people live up to the things that we said. Like, oh, that was 4 years ago. That's what you said, though. So you got to be very careful and not rush in just because the general sentiment is that we should say something. I mean, we went through the same thing with the anti-Asian hate, and we got to make a statement today. Really? Can't we just wait till Monday? Can't we craft our words carefully so that we know what we're saying? Can't we ask our colleagues who are Asian what they think and get their voice in here? I'm not Asian. What is it that you want me to say? This is wrong. We already know that.
I think, Dr. Black, that's an excellent example. Another excellent example of being reactive or responsive. There's this need to react, but I think for us, the invitation is let's be thoughtful, let's be responsive,
Right.
so that we can make a greater impact. Another thing, I got to have some fun with this. We are perceived as liberal now, but let's remember, California gave us Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
California gave us Pete Wilson. California gave us Proposition 209. California was the home of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
California, gave us our first governor, Peter Burnett. One of the first things that he did was pass the Indian Protection Act, which ironically gave legal permission to hunt and kill and remove indigenous people from the state who had been here for 10,000 years. So we're progressive now. We have not always been. I think that's important, going back to Dr. Sandals' point, that let's recognize the history that we've come from. Yes, we have made tremendous, and even when you talk about Hollywood also gave us D.W. Griffin and The Birth of a Nation. Hollywood gave us blaxploitation movies. Hollywood gave us a lot of bullcrap that people, when they think about living in an urban core, think about pimps and pushers and prostitutes and, drug dealers. That was created in, liberal Hollywood. So let's remember, we're progressive now, but we have a history that indicates otherwise.
Dr. Sanders, sounded like you were itching to say something.
I was affirming what each of those gentlemen just said. It's really sort of powerful to see these volleys go back and forth. You're like, yeah, that's an excellent point. Oh, so is that one. Oh, wow. And so we see this balance taking place. I really appreciate that. As a couple of at least, Brother Whitfield, you don't know this about me, but I am a comic book aficionado. So
I love it. We got to get together after this.
Oh, I'm trying to tell you. Listen,
are you DC or Marvel Universe?
I am Okay, I got to show you this.
Okay.
I'm sorry, y'all. Hopefully you can see this.
Scholarship, folks.
I'm
Right. It's still scholarship.
We can't see.
I'm sure he's going to make a DEI connection here. So
absolutely. And I'm here. I am here for it.
Maybe not.
Hold on. Maybe not. Let me just see.
Okay.
I'm trying to turn off my background. Oh, shucks. Okay. Maybe this just isn't the time, but because I'm having a difficult time trying to figure that out at the moment. But so I collected all the figures from Endgame, right?
Oh my God.
Endgame.
All right.
So I have all of them. And I also have all the figures from Justice League, the Justice League movie. And I'm just a big fan. So the point I was making, I'll get it to the point where I can show you all. But I wanted to share with you, among my interests is the cinema, namely the Batman trilogy. And I say the Batman trilogy. I'm talking about the Dark Knight trilogy.
Right. I'm with you.
Man. And in it, I think it's Ra's al Ghul. No, who's Batman? I think it was Bruce Wayne, who said that I'm muddying the character. Someone said you either live long enough.
Oh yeah.
You die a hero, or you live long enough to become a villain. Right. And so for me, I feel like the lifespan of notions like contemporary and conspicuously consumed DEI work has an ephemeral lifespan. And I feel like it's lived its life. Right. So now it's almost dying the way that we've seen it the last few years. And it's like we're viewing it in juxtaposition with these other things that are, again, I go back to my term weaponizing, and it all just becomes trash, verbal trash. But the work itself remains, and it's always been puissant. It's always been there, right? And then the other thing I wanted to say, I feel like contemporary and institutional DEI efforts are an effort to dilute Blackness. We co-opt so much from the Black community. We create this wealth of language and style and just everything. But it gets co-opted, and you would never even know sometimes the Black folks created it.
I mean, woke is a perfect example of that.
Perfect example, right? I was listening. Okay, this is a very nuanced and niche story I'm going to share with you. It's an anecdote, but hopefully it's representative of something to you all.
Right.
We know language has many different indices. It looks different, but in terms of people and demographics and sociolect and dialect. But I was talking to this young lady recently, beautiful young lady. She was Latina, and she had a coat over her head. Her head was on the desk. She had a coat over her head. And I talked to her. I said something like, "What's up, baby girl?" Something like that. And she talked to me like she was a straight sister. She used every bit of surface level Ebonics or Black language or Black speak that I had no idea that was not a sister until she lifted her head. And so I say all that to say is that sometimes we can use popular language and we can absorb it in these other spaces so much so that it becomes diluted. And so what once was Black speak, and that was part of our mother tongue when we spoke to one another, it's actually now sort of, as I mentioned, co-opted, and it becomes something different. We see Coca-Cola commercials with folks talking Ebonics and slang, right? There was a time when they derided us for speaking that language. So anyway, I feel like DEI work has lived its life the way we see it in institutions, the way it's practiced. We're seeing these mass firings, rightly or wrongly, but I think they have used its usefulness up, they being the power structure, the institutions. And now we're seeing the fallout, unfortunately, in many cases.
So, and I want to wrap this up here because we have to get to one more segment. So quickly, if we can, what's the pathway forward? What does that
I
look?
think for me, I remain, Dr. Sandals, while I align with your concepts, I choose to use the word evolve as opposed to die. I think this is the next evolution of the conversation of how do we engage all humans so that all humans feel a sense of belonging and connection and can thrive to fulfill his, her, their maximum potential. And so I think there are a couple things that we could keep in mind, Dr. Rice. Number one, let's remember that this, how folks say, going to Ebonics, we ain't new to this, we true to this. Let's recognize that this has been an ongoing journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And when we measure progress, let's measure it longitudinally over decades, over long periods of time, as opposed to short windows of time. Number two, I think, and from the point of how do we engage one another while we're in this space, let's recognize the humanity in everyone, especially when we may not be aligned or we may agree, when we may disagree with them. So let's not cancel, let's not unfriend, let's not retreat to our own echo chambers, but let's really get comfortable being uncomfortable. We know that growth begins at the end of our comfort zone in the transformational space. So let's shift our thinking. And also let's shift our thinking in terms of how we imagine, how we envision conflict. That conflict now becomes an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to expand, an opportunity to seek that next level of elevation and evolve to that next level. And lastly, I would say, there's a wonderful book called Subtle Acts of Exclusion by Michael Barron and Tiffany Jana. Now, Dr. Rice, you and I have talked about this book before. We use it with all our leadership development as we are talking about this work. The solution that these thought leaders came up with is intentional acts of inclusion. Let's actively step out of our echo chamber. Let's actively seek opportunities to grow and to expand and evolve beyond what we normally know as our own, and build those bridges of understanding. I believe that these are critical elements in our pathway forward, how we get to, and the work is never over. In much the same way, and I know we're all from academia, we've never gone to a department meeting or a college council meeting where the college president says, you know what? Hey, we don't have to worry about enrollment anymore. We're nailing it. So let's not talk about enrollment. Let's not talk about, graduation rate. We're nailing that too. And in terms of or fiscal sustainability, we've never been in a meeting where our CFO has said, don't worry about the budget. We're good. These are and so much like the accreditation process.
It's ongoing,
right?
That's what I'm hearing you say.
It's ongoing. It never stops. And I think that's the difference. If folks who started out as transactional in the reactive phase, because they genuinely, hey, let's put a little thing on it, let's fix it, and then let's get back to work. This work is ongoing. It's continuous. It never stops. And I think if we remember that, we can, as the folks say in the church, let's run this race with patience. And he who endures to the end is going to make it. And I am I'm very, very encouraged by what I see, despite all of these things, because I think those are yet opportunities for further engagement and further evolution. And, it can show us how we can engage with folks who don't think the same way we do, have different worldviews and different perspectives, but we can still find a way to align if we choose to.
Nice. Gentlemen, final thoughts?
Dr. Black?
No, go ahead.
I think the United States in particular has always featured the commodification of Black bodies, Black language, Black bodies, all the things exploitative. And I think this is no different. And so for me, the path forward necessarily involves a recognition and a really, really deep examination of our history. And so when we lay out the timeline from 1619, actually from 1441 to 2024, when we lay it out, what we see is the carnage, time and again, economic, physical, educational, and so forth and so on. Nothing's new. Our lenses sometimes become myopic when we look at it, but the outcomes are still the same. And we're seeing these challenges with Black folks being commodified, being destroyed, being silenced, all the things. So the path forward to me is an acknowledgement of that, right? Anti-Blackness underscores every societal quarter, right? So I would say let's examine that critically. And let's use critical race theory as a lens for examining things that are anti-Black, right? In a real critical way, rather than dispensing with it as a notion. Whenever someone tells you something is ridiculous or it's out of hand, right, summarily dismiss it, we have to look at that more closely. So I would say let's use that as a tool. Let's examine not only DEI work, but every quarter of society through the critical lens of a critical race theory or Black crit or a Lat crit, whatever you want to use. And let's get about the work of unlayering the root causes of some of these challenges. George Floyd's murder was an effect, right? So let's start looking at some of these things more critically, I think. And that's, for me, that's a path forward.
Okay. Dr. Black, it's on you.
We're teachers by trade. If I don't value what you bring into my classroom, I can't teach you. And that's how I go through life. I heard a gentleman once say, I'm coming off real hoity-toity on this, but I don't debate with people. And I really don't. I can have a conversation with you, but I converse with people on my level. Everyone else I teach. So if you come to the table without a full understanding, I can teach you. If you're not ready to learn, I can't help you. But what I can do is, the teacher in you start with where they are. But I have to acknowledge what you're bringing to the table, whatever that may be. Whether it's socioeconomic status, whether it's age, whether I'm going to talk to a 55-year-old a little different than I'll talk to a 5-year-old. But what all those things combined is called is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how I deliver that message, I use those three things to deliver that message to you. If you want me to get rid of those things, then I need to talk to everyone like they're 58, Black, male from Detroit. You would want me to do that, that's fine.
All right. So we're going to pause there, everybody. We have one more segment. Our honor roll and detention is up next. This is the 2%. All right. Welcome back to the 2%. Hey, this has been a great conversation. I hope you guys learned something about DEI, got some history, or really just enjoyed us. So as we do, we want to wrap this segment. We want to wrap this episode up, I should say, with our segment, honor roll in detention. So with the honor roll in detention, for those of us who haven't been with us before, what we do is on the honor roll, we honor somebody that's doing something good, somebody that did something that stood out to us. And then we have detention. And you know, that's where the kids who are having challenges, who aren't necessarily following directions and doing right, you need a timeout. You need to go sit in detention and think about what you did. So, because he's our guest, because you know he decided to join us and bless us with some of his expertise, I'm gonna let Jacques start off and give him the floor. So, Jacques, who you putting on your honor roll and who you putting in detention this week?
Thank you. And first of all, let me just say thank you so much for your gracious hospitality. It's a pleasure to be with you folks. I could chat with you guys for a long time. So the conversation was uplifting and very insightful. So
Nice.
for my honor roll, I want to start with, since we're all educators,
Yes.
I want to uplift Mission College in Santa Clara, California. I've just recently have done some wonderful work with them. And I want to acknowledge them for their bravery. Most recently, I have supported them in co-facilitating conversations between Muslim faculty and students and Jewish faculty and students in the wake of what's happening globally, and particularly in the Middle East. I want to acknowledge that president. I want to acknowledge the faculty, staff, and administration who are taking on difficult issues and really putting DEI in action. So the S and DEI for them is engagement. Equity is about the removal of barriers. So even though we may have different perspectives and worldviews, how can we come together as an academy? And so I just want to give a huge shout out to the college there. In terms of my
Real quick, I want to interrupt you before you go there. Just very briefly, if you can, how did that conversation go? Because you spoke with Palestinians and Muslims and Jewish people.
I spoke with, there were Jewish faculty, Muslim faculty, and then Jewish and Muslim students, and as well as other, students and faculty administration from other cultural backgrounds.
How did that go?
I thought it went great. It is the first conversation of many conversations. So I did 2 workshops or co-facilitated 2 workshops. We created a pathway forward for them for the entire college to be engaged. Is certainly something that, and I want to give kudos to the president and her leadership team, because this is something from the highest ranks of the institution. They are focused on bringing folks together, making everyone feel a sense of safety and belonging, regardless of their perspective, and really tackling a difficult issue. So I thought it went very well.
Thank you. Okay, so your detention.
I'm gonna have to give detention to state of Texas and what is happening with that, their own version of immigration law that I think that the Supreme Court wrongly decided. And so I did see today an appeals court blocked that implementation. And it just, I am hoping that that this elevates us in a national conversation, that we really need to put politics aside and look at history and how we got here, because that's its own other segment. Looking at the Mexican-American War and the causes of that, and how America expanded geographically by 1/3, and what was the effect of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and some of the things that could have been resolved. Like Dr. Sandals said, 100 and something years ago, we have kicked the can down to where we are today. So that's my list.
It sounds like you've been reading books.
That's what we do as academics.
3,000, right? 3,000 books.
He said he visited a library too, so I'm gonna go ahead and believe him right there. Dr. Black, what say you? Who's on your honor roll? Who you putting in detention?
Well, let me start with detention. I just want to put anyone in detention who feels that it's a good thing or it's okay to oppress anybody. Because what you could do is either mind your business, say nothing. You know, I don't feel the need to go out of my way to oppress someone. Like, why should I, like you would not see me if someone's having a peaceful march. What am I out there for? Unless I'm peacefully marching.
Mhm.
There's no need for me to be out there. You go home. Why? Because you know where I should be? Home. There's no need for that. There's no need for those type of shenanigans. And I just have to, anyone who does that, no matter what you think you're losing, because I guarantee you've lost nothing.
Mhm.
You have that they're in eternal detention, as well as the state of Texas, who's in eternal detention for everything. Everything I've ever heard about Texas, especially as education goes, means you should be in detention.
Your honor roll.
My honor roll is for the parents and students of Temecula Unified School District.
Okay. Enlighten us.
So the parents and students of Temecula sued the school district because the school district initiated policies that I can't read my own handwriting, that included censorship in curriculum and a mandatory notice to parents if students identified as transgender. So
Mhm.
that was the school board. So the students were like, bet. So they sued and won.
Nice.
So, and I know that people have since left the school board, all the Christian people, but that's another story for another day, Christianity and
Yeah.
its place in oppression.
Mm.
But so hats off to them, because there's, as our guest said today, there's always a way. There's always more. It's never the end.
Mhm.
I know things might look bleak. Things look bleak every day, though, for somebody. So
Fact.
you got to push through all that, because it's never the end.
Perfect. All right. Dr. Sandals, your turn.
Mine is far less profound than my predecessors, so I'm gonna throw something together here. No, I'll start with my honor roll. For me, my honor roll goes to any leader, and leaders are not defined by me by position. They're individuals who make bold, audacious steps toward progress. Be you a classroom teacher, a mom, a dad, single grandma, whatever it is, who makes these steps, these visionary steps to try to make improvement. But certainly school leaders, institution leaders, those who are in positions of power, to really embrace the idea, the principles that underlie DEI work. And again, not the conspicuous brand, but the brand that leads to transformation, leads to people feeling a part, leads to people who are different being an enmeshed part of the culture and the fabric and the policy driving that moves institutions forward. So it's all those people, homeschoolers, principals, teachers, lay people. It's all the things, all the people. So I my hats are off to them, and it's audacious work, as I said, and I think kudos are to be had to those who are leaders in that way. And then conversely, my detention goes to those who are the antithesis of those I just mentioned.
Mhm.
So those who do surface level work in the name of having different faces in a room without the criticality that undergirds it, without trying to be transformative, without trying to be visionary, without being progressive and moving things forward in ways that change society for the better, substantively. So I'll rest there.
And the state of Texas.
And there you go.
So as you just mentioned, Dr. Black, it is fitting that you said the state of Texas, because as the final honor roll and detention, mine is situated where? in the great state of Texas. So, and
I
it's
don't know about great, but go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's in the state
It's
of
large. Yeah.
um, there was a case a couple of months ago. Most of you might have heard about it, and it really bothered me. And so it's been settled, but I still think that it should remain in the forefront. So I first want to honor Daryl George, who was a young man in Texas who was suspended for his hairstyle. The young man had locks. Apparently, he was an honor student. Was on his way to college, is still on his way to college, I believe. Um, Last I read, and his education was interrupted because of his hairstyle. And I'm honoring him and his parents for standing their ground and taking that fight as far as they could take it. In February, it went to the state district court where, unfortunately, the person I put in detention, state district judge Chap Kane, heard the arguments and basically ruled against him and saying that the school in enforcing their policy did not violate the law, and that keeping this young man out of school for several months, almost 6 months of his education in his senior year, that there was basically nothing wrong with that, that it was all good. And so he's definitely in detention, but kudos to Daryl and his parents for standing firm in that decision and taking that fight as far as they did, because a lot of us, would have said, well, it's his senior year. I want him to go to college. I don't want to, we don't want any changes, and we don't want to do anything like that. So, they would relent, and they didn't. To what cost, I don't know. Hopefully, his education is not completely interrupted. I hope it's still great. And the last connection that I'll make is that this story came back into my mind this week because there was another story that went viral about a young man at NASA who took a picture with his dreads, and it went viral because and the hashtag was Black Astronaut at NASA. And then all the Black people who were scientists at NASA showed their company picture, and it was a whole thing, and it was beautiful. And the first dude that kicked it off was another young man who ironically had been suspended in school for his dreads, and now he is a scientist and at NASA who is being celebrated for sharing his picture of him rocking his locks at NASA. So I thought that was worth celebrating in connection with the whole Daryl George situation. Okay, look. So this was a great first episode. We're back. We'll be getting these regularly. I'd like to say every other week, but that's what we're gonna shoot for. I'm gonna leave it there. And so check your social media, check our page, and make sure you tune in to the 2%. All right, guys, this is it. Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation. We will see you on the next round. Have a good
right.
one. Later.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Until the next time, this has been the 2%. Peace.